Hi, and welcome to the podcast. I'm Todd Milewski here with a weary Nicole Haase from Nova Scotia, where she has covered 21 games of the Under-18 Women's World Championship in the span of 9 days, 7 of them playing days. And Nicole, I'm sure you're kind of tired at this point after being at rinks for 18-hour days, some of
Let's
them,
preemptively apologize for all the yawn.
the yawns are, there's gonna be some yawns, yeah. U.S. comes away with the gold again with a 2-0 victory over Canada on Sunday night. Let's start there, Nicole. Is that a just a continuation of the U.S., I guess, year of good feelings or year plus of good feelings around USA hockey? What do you make of it?
I think that for the most part, it was a toss-up between them and Canada. I think they were well matched. I felt like the U.S. sort of handled, this was maybe one of the poorer, it was not a great tournament. Neither of those two teams were really challenged for more than a period or two until they got to the gold medal game. And that's hard to then completely up the intensity and be the team you need to be your big rival. But I think the U.S. just sort of handled that a little better. There's probably an interesting side we could go off at some point. I always feel like Hockey Canada can get very stuck in their ways. Particularly, I think, at this age when they're very much trying to teach them to like follow your system and make your habits. That's a thing I felt about the senior team, and then that like really compounds down here. And I did feel a little bit that like sometimes you just need to let your players cook. And I know that can be really weird to say at 17, but I felt like for example, the U.S.'s first goal was a set play that the two players chose to try themselves off a face-off. And I don't think anybody at Canada is allowed to make that decision. Any player. So I just think it's a different approach. It's been certainly, there's nothing you can take away. Canada's won a couple of golds at this level. They're obviously been doing pretty well at the senior level, have all the Olympic golds. So it's hard to criticize some of it. But I do think that there was a system set up. The games didn't necessarily provide a whole lot of competition. And then when it came time to sort of execute that plan, I'm not sure the players were in the best position to do it. But it was one of those games. I compared it like an old Wisconsin-Minnesota game, or now maybe Wisconsin-Ohio State. Like it was just floppy and chippy and messy in the best possible way. Nobody held possession for a while, right? It was just back and forth and lots of slapping at the pucks, and whoever comes away with it is going to get a chance. And but when you're so set in your system and then never get set off in your offensive zone, I think that left some of their players not quite sure what to do, if that makes sense.
And yeah, referees let them play, which
they really did.
Got to be taken to let them play, meaning you can get away with a lot. And we've seen that happen in college too, even at in some of the biggest games of the season. It's just like referees have decided, unless it's blatant, we don't want to play a role in this. So, figure it out. How did you feel like that maybe played into just kind of the flow of that game? How it continued to, nobody got the power play, or there's very few power play chances to try and change momentum or do any of those kind of things. So it really just felt like let's let you guys decide it out here.
Yeah, that bit was nice, right? And I don't feel like it got out of hand at any point, and so I feel like is that an age thing? I don't know. But there were a couple times. It's so interesting too, because you're in a position like people out here in Cape Breton, like they don't watch a ton of women's hockey. They definitely don't watch it at this level. So there were times that the crowd really wanted a penalty, and I was like, yeah, I don't think that is getting called a whole lot of places. But I was sitting next to the reporter from the local newspaper, and he was like, yeah, this is more physical than I thought. He's like, everybody told me it would be. He's like, but this is even more than I thought.
Okay.
But, there would be a lot of shoulder to shoulder, and there was a lot of sort of smushing people up against glass, and they're just kind of never going to call that, So it was nice to keep the flow of the game. I say that there was no flow to that game. The game was like I said, a hot mess, complimentary, best possible way. But nobody was doing what they thought they wanted to be able to do. So it was kind of who dealt with that the best. And I think one of the big things that the U.S. did was very well in transition. So the way that they sort of turned a turnover, because again, nobody's holding, like there's turnovers and the puck's hopping. And if there's a chance, like the U.S. is heading the other direction. And one of the things that I think Canada sometimes struggled with, and Coach Miki Tanahara talked about early on, was they were really trying to put the idea in their head of defense first, that like it's fine to get involved on the offense, but like defense turns into offense. And if you cheat too far forward, like that, you can get away with that against, Hungary or Switzerland, but you can't get away with that against some other teams. Czechia would also have been a team that would have given them problems with some of that. And so I thought the U.S. took advantage of their breaks when they had them. And also Bianca, I think it's Biritieri, played a spectacular game in net. She just was absolutely outstanding. And coming into this tournament, I would have thought Morgan Stickney was going to play every game. I mean, she kind of did last tournament and had a long shutout streak, and they split time early. But it's Biritieri. I always want to do. It's not BRI. It's BIR. Biritieri was the goalie that got the wins in the summer series. So essentially, is the only goalie that has beat Canada in several years at this age level. And so nobody on USA Hockey would want to say it. They were very diplomatic about all our goalies, but I think the decision was to go with her all along, and it was a very good one.
Yeah. How about the environment in that building? Obviously, a pro-Canada crowd, but a good pocket of American family and friends. And it did seem like the Canadian fans were trying to will their team for a lot of that game. And there was one gentleman in the front row that you kept seeing banging on the glass throughout the night. Talk a little bit about that, part of just the evening of how the atmosphere was compared to other events like this you've seen, which, I mean, I remember, was it in Czechia that there was I don't know if it was at U18 or Women's Worlds, but
that was seniors, but yeah.
That was seniors, but it was just like, this was a massive crowd that was just incredibly like influential in getting their team involved and keeping them going at some points.
Yes. Side note is the first application for U18s for next year came from Czechia. So I'm very hopeful that that's where we're going next year. Because I agree that crowd was amazing. And the IIHF and Czechia did a great job. They like created a beer garden outside and like kept people around and like made it an event, which is just a thing that we don't see a ton on the U18 side. So fingers crossed. But yes, it was over 5,000 people, which I think has to be by far the loudest crowd I've seen at a U18. When we were in Sweden made the gold medal game, and so they did fill that barn, but it wasn't as big. And unfortunately, in that, like immediately the U.S. took over, and so that crowd was loud for a while. But then, and I would say Canada's crowd last night was so nice, so loud, so supportive. They were willing them. I wanted them to get a goal just for that crowd. People have been so nice and so wonderful, and have come to games. I mean, there have been, some of them sparsely attended, but particularly we moved from a rink that had like, I think about 1,200 seats to this bigger barn starting at quarterfinals. And they filled it for the first quarterfinal with kids and just have done a really good job about getting people there. And a ton of people in Canada gear were there for the bronze medal game. So that was nice. I will say too, most of the crowd stayed around for the whole post-game ceremony and were like applauding the Americans and cheering for the girls that were named to like the all-star team and things like that. So the crowd was just really cool and nice. And I thought it was pretty awesome that everybody got to play in that atmosphere, and it was fun. The Americans basically said like, yeah, we liked getting, we love playing in that environment. And we liked getting to make them a little quiet. And so, because I'm petty, I appreciated that amount of petty. Like, the girls were like, yeah, that was awesome. It's the biggest crowd we played in front of it. Also, it was nice to shut it down. So, no, it was spectacular. It was essentially a sellout. I think they were thinking that was the most people that ever watched hockey in that barn. There's a Q. I don't remember all the initials, but the Q, the Quebec League, plays there, and they said they do get decent crowds, but not usually quite that big. So it was fun. They had signs and flags, and just the atmosphere was spectacular. So that was amazing, and they never gave up on that, because honestly that game could have turned at any moment. And so it was loud for 60 minutes, which was amazing. And any girl from the Atlantic region got massive cheers. So like, even if you're from PEI, if you're from anywhere near here, those girls got massive cheers, which was
The U.S. and Canada playing for the gold medal, not a surprise. Finland ending up in the relegation game, a surprise. Finland losing the relegation game and going down a division next season, a massive
surprise.
shock. What can you say about that whole situation of how they got there and then not being able to, win that game to stay up? It just feels like for a country that's been, close to that, in medal games kind of environment, that's a big drop.
I will say, if you told me, 10 days ago that that's where we'd be, I would be surprised. After watching Finland play in their first game, not super surprised. And then afterwards, when you're talking to the coach and the players, and they kind of don't have any idea what to say about what went wrong. And that kind of happened over and over again. It's like, well, they're prepared, but they're scared, or we don't know what happened. And so there was a lot of non-answers, which was, just frustrating from a journalistic standpoint, but also like, and again, it's like they could have been saying different things in their non-English interviews, right? Their Finnish interviews. But yeah, they looked like they were standing still, at all times. And even other coaches were saying like, well, we prepared, we watched tape and we just saw that they weren't moving their feet at all. So we just knew we could skate around them. So yeah, having watched them throughout the tournament, that they were relegated is not at all a surprise. But from that larger talking point, yeah, I hope, and my concern is that, clearly they're not developing the way that they can and should be. We know that just generally women's hockey is not get enough attention from the federations. It's all a hierarchy, right? Like there are countries that would love to get the attention Finland gets, but Finland would love to get what the US and, Czechia now. And so it is a hierarchy. But they have a team in their league, like the Aurora Liga. They created like fundamentally a development team, like the U.S. development team that plays. It's called Team Quotare, and it's like essentially a high school for their hockey girls. And so they did that a few years back, and this is where we're at a few years into that experiment. So that's bad. And so, yeah, I guess my concern is that this is like it depends on what the response is. Is the response like this is a national embarrassment and we have to fix it? Or is this response, this isn't a national embarrassment and we're never giving you money again and figure it out, you know? And so like it sort of depends on what that response looks like to decide how this is going to go down. I think and hope that I know that they're embarrassed, and I know that this is really concerning. And so, yeah, but this isn't a super huge shock. Having watched them the last few years, like they weren't getting better, they weren't improving, and so hopefully this makes some people back home pay attention. I don't know.
Yeah, that's the big question going forward. Is this just a shrug of the shoulders, like, does anyone care enough to make it mean something? That's where we're going to look over the next couple of years, because let's be honest, they're going to, unless something crazy happens, they're going to be back up for the 2028 main event,
which will be back in Canada. So,
which also feels like it's a million years away, just from talking about that now. But yeah, it's you've lost now really 2 years of your age group of having that team competing for anything. So
and it makes me wonder, like all the non-IIHF competitions, like they play in various different things. Like, will they be invited to some of that stuff? Will other teams be scheduling those? So not only do they lose that competition of the one 10-day IIHF tournament, but also like what happens in between.
Yeah,
which like clearly wasn't preparing them enough as it was. But yeah,
right. There has to be a team going down every year, but I don't think any of us thought it was going to be Finland going in. So
no, but like the flip side of that is way to go Hungary, who had not been at the top for, I believe it's 12 or 14 years. It's a lot of years.
And it's been a long time that a team that just came up stayed up. So
they played with a ton of heart. They scored one goal the whole tournament before the relegation game and then scored 7. And I went through the IIHF record book and I could not find a women's team from Hungary that had scored 7 goals. So I don't, they had their one goal was against Switzerland, in which was like sort of the pre-relegation. The loser in that game was going to go to the relegation, so that was like the pre-relegation relegation. And they scored 1 goal in that game, and that was it. So, just a ton of heart. It was even just the approach, like the way that they would come out after a game where they lost a bunch. They were ready to talk about what they had learned and how it was going to help them. And I felt like there was something to being sort of the humble, like, we're new here and whatever happens, happens. Whereas it felt like everything from Finland was like a gut punch that they didn't know how to react to. And so maybe just that attitude of it, like you could see that Hungary learned things in some of those games. They got blown out and then used that in that relegation game. And maybe that approach alone was the difference.
Right. Last thing I want to get to before we take a break and then get into NCAA results from last week. You've been to 5 of these now? Is that right? 6? Something like that. 5? What are you going to remember about this one in terms of the behind the scenes? The things that, a lot of us watched these games and saw the TV production. What are you going to remember of what you saw, what you experienced, in those buildings to make this experience stand out?
One thing that I thought was very cool and that I think is more prevalent here in Canada than at home was that like that first stadium was on they use First Nations land or Indigenous land, and like so everything in Canada is usually in English and in French, and like a good percentage of so like every goal announcement, every roster, all of that stuff. But we had a couple games where it was in English and the local First Nations language. They had the player of the tournament got a beaded flower, which is the flower of Nova Scotia, but was beaded by First Nations people. There was just a very cool interweaving of that into the whole experience, from being in that first arena to at this separate arena. Like they made specific Hockey Canada jerseys using iconography from the First Nations people. They had a whole day where most of the people that got tickets that day were from that from the First Nations group. And then they also, and I'm sure we'll hear about this, but I just want to say I thought it was really cool that the local immigration office was giving out tickets to newly minted Canadians and inviting them to the tournament as like, this is our nation's sport. It's a little funny, but also
this is what we do as Canadians, right?
Yeah. Welcome to winter in Cape Breton. Go to a hockey game. Which was, yes, it's a little cute and funny, but also just with everything that's going on, particularly for us kind of close to home, I just was very telling, the acknowledgement of like, you're welcome here and we're going to help make your transition easier. So there were, I think maybe the socio-political parts of it might stand out more than anything, but I just, hockey's so beloved here. And it was, they had daddy-daughter contests and just the sort of stuff that like, there were people that were excited for women's hockey to be here in this part of the country and to cheer for girls that are from 6 hours away, but like, hey, they're from my province kind of thing. And just a real love and embrace of like, these are future people. Like nobody in the stands yesterday cared that these girls were 16 to 18 and may never make an Olympic team. Like these are the best girls in the country and we want to watch them and cheer for them. And that was really cool. Like maybe a national championship game would be the other time we really see that, like, so I think that's probably it, particularly because sometimes we're very small towns in some of these countries and it's not necessarily the most like clued in fan base. And so it just felt like nobody cared that it was anything other than great hockey they were watching yesterday. And that was fun.
Cool. All right. That's a good way to end it. We will take a break. When we come back, we will talk about all the hat tricks that we saw over the weekend in NCAA hockey. Stay with us on the podcast. We're back with the podcast. Todd, Milewski, and Nicole Haase here with you for, let's talk about some some results from last week in NCAA hockey. I want to start with Yale, ranked number 13 last week. Had games against teams ranked ahead of them in the USCHO.com poll. Number 12, Colgate on Friday. Number 10, Cornell on Saturday. And they got 2 home wins there. 3-0 against Colgate on Friday. 3-1 against Cornell Saturday. The name that we're learning over the last month or so is Samson Frey, who is a freshman goalie at Yale. She made 29 saves Friday, 33 saves Saturday. These numbers are getting kind of ridiculous. 8-0 in 8 starts, 0.65 goals against, 0.971 save percentage, 4 shutouts. Now that's those are numbers that if that stretches over a long part of the season, you're in the PodKaz conversation. I don't know if she's going to get there, given that she had a kind of a later start. But man, what a run over the last, I guess, month and change, what we're talking about now.
Yeah, absolutely. We both sort of went, wait, who? So apologies. And yeah, that's awesome. I mean, it's kind of crazy to me that we're in January and we're still talking about sort of new teams at the forefront, right? Like Princeton making the push, now Yale up to, would you say 10 in the NPI? 10
in the NPI, right? Princeton at 7. So yeah, those are real legitimate contenders right now.
And ahead of the Clarksons and Colgates. And yeah, it's getting to the point where, like, yeah, you can't, there's not a ton of room to make ground anymore. I mean, we're talking, what, 6-ish weeks? Like, it's mid-January.
Let me count. Hold on. Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
1, 2, 4, 5. Something like that. 7, I think.
Ish. I'll take it. Yeah. I mean, it's just, it's kind of nuts. So yeah, good for Yale, because they definitely weren't on the radar for a little while, and it's like we've been talking about all along. Like, you have to win your games. You have to take care of your own business, and you do that and not worry about everybody else, and you end up where Princeton and Yale are right now. And that's really, like, kind of the end of that, right? Like, you gotta just go out and do what you need to do and win the games you're supposed to win. And apparently pull a goalie out that's having a spectacular rookie season. So good for them, and I think we'll definitely be paying attention and seeing what comes next.
Yeah, a good run here for Yale, like you mentioned, up to 10 in the NPI, 17-7 for the season. Princeton 17-4. So these are 2 teams that may not have been in that group that we were looking at the start of the season in ECAC hockey, but have really pushed their way into the conversation for not only league championships, but at large bids in the NCAA tournament, which is great to see that there's teams that probably thought at the start of the season that we're good enough to make a push this season, but then they have to go out and do it, and they're doing that.
Exactly. Or that, I mean, and as we talked about with Princeton last week, had a rough couple first weeks, and everybody went, well, that's the end of that. And, they fell off radar, and they just kept doing their stuff. And so, yeah, I agree. It's, and by the other course, like, maybe we were, sort of too focused on teams based on what they did last year, and stayed too focused on that going ahead, and not seeing what these teams were doing to start. It's, we've only got so many screens we can watch. It's not easy, but yeah, I think, it's pretty interesting. I know that people get frustrated with the same couple of teams at the top. And while that hasn't changed, there's sure been a whole heck of volatility below, let's say, the top 3. And that, I mean, Penn State going up, UMD coming down, now Princeton and Yale in this conversation, and Holy Cross and Minnesota State being in the NPI top 15. There's just, it's been really interesting. And I think it says a lot of good things about, like, where we're headed, right?
Yeah, I hope so. And I hope that means maybe some belief then too for teams that, this year maybe are in that, 15 to 20, 16 to 20, 22 range of the NPI, where they're, upper half, but not necessarily challenging for anything. Whereas maybe next year or the year after, they, with the right group, with the right mentality and outlook, can put together a season that can also challenge. And that's, I think that's what everyone hopes for around the game is that there's more teams that are feeling like they have a chance at something.
Yeah, absolutely.
So also in ECAC last week, Brown with a 6-2 win over Colgate, another rough weekend for Colgate, dropping to 12-1 overall. Monique Lyons and Margot Norhead each had 2 goals for Brown in that win. A good win for Brown, but again, Colgate now pulling up the MPI at number 12.
After having gone on a little bit of a better run.
I'm wrong. That's 16. I'm sorry, 16 for Colgate. Looking at the wrong school there. So, but right, they had looked like they're starting to climb out of it. Now we're looking at a real uphill climb, and probably looking like a team that's going to have to win the ECAC playoffs to get into the tournament.
God, I assume that the ECAC tournament is going to be an absolute chaos fest.
Could be,
because just clearly anybody can beat anybody, and not in the coach's cliche. We all say that about everybody in our conference sort of way. 6 goals from Brown is really good as well. So I think there's probably quite a bit to build from on there. As soon as you said they scored 6 goals, I hadn't seen the box score, but you absolutely know that those two, Monique Lyons and Margot Norhead, were involved. So those two have been sort of quietly a really great offensive engine for them. And yeah, I can't imagine that they won't at least make a really solid run at doing some fun stuff and upsetting teams in the postseason.
Yeah. Over in the WCHA, this is where things got just like the goal scoring got out of hand at some points here last week. But I want to start with a different result. We're going to talk about Ohio State and Minnesota in a minute, but another rough weekend for Duluth. 2-2 tie with St. Cloud State on Friday, and St. Cloud won the shootout 1-0. Duluth up 2-0 in that game with 5 minutes to play, and Avery Farrell, Melee Pion scored for St. Cloud to tie that up, send it to overtime, and the Huskies won that one in the shootout. And then a 5-2 win for St. Cloud on Saturday. Good weekend for Amelia Carrico in goal for the Huskies. 39 saves Friday, 37 Saturday. But for Duluth, 0-4-2 in 2026, and hasn't scored more than 2 goals in any of those games. That's not what I don't think. I mean, we were talking about Finland
your
earlier.
inability to choose the right word there.
Right, they're not like in danger of relegation or anything like that, like Finland was. But it feels like a team that we were expecting a lot more from coming out of the gate in 2026, and this is kind of the opposite. Almost like turn it around the other way, and that's the direction they've gone.
Yeah, I am not any closer to having answers this week. That's for sure. It's head scratching. Honestly, I mean, they're have such good offensive talent on that team. So where the disconnect is, and we know how great Ed Gaston can be. We saw how good they were against Wisconsin, and then it's just like these have been the 2 weeks that followed that, and they're like, where did that team go? But yeah, I expect. I mean, yeah, their offense is really, really skilled, really fast, really talented, have great shots. And Amelia Chirko is really good, don't get me wrong, and obviously had a great weekend, but I expect them to put in more goals than 2 a game as they have. So lots of head scratching up there. Maybe we'll have to talk to Welland and some of the other folks and get some of our Duluth friends to tell us what they've been able to see, because I'm watching, like we watched them be played really well against Wisconsin, and it's like, it's kind of how I always feel like you watch a team do something so good, and you're like, well, what have you been doing? Like, why did I watch you play so bad some other games? So yeah, I imagine that the coaching staff feels like we do, but they're getting to the point where this is like concerning for them when it comes to postseason and things like that. So they got to figure something out sooner rather than later.
Big weekend for individual performances around the WCHA. Abbey Murphy, a week after, having the most ridiculous assist of the season, comes back out in an 11-1 win over Bemidji State in Bemidji on Saturday, and has 4 goals and 2 assists. Ava Lindsay, 3 goals in that one. But, Abbey Murphy scored 33 goals as a junior, scored 33 goals as a senior. She's now already at 33 goals in her 5th year in just 24 games.
Wasn't
Leads
she
the
pushing
scoring
for the
race.
goal scoring lead last year?
Yeah,
that?
she had it until the last couple of games. I believe Layla Edwards passed her on the last. Oh, she
Just
had when
think,
she
it's
had
not
a
like
hat
that was
trick
a
in
low
the
total.
semifinal.
Like that was
No, right. That
nationally
was
a high
that was
total.
right up there.
Yeah.
Exactly. And so she leads the points race by 12 points. She leads the goals race by 6, I believe. We were talking before that this Olympic break is going to negatively impact some stats races in terms of the players that are going to be gone. Well, maybe not for Abbey. I mean, this is like she's setting herself up if she has another couple of games this weekend that with a lot of points, she might have she might come back with a lead after missing 8 games.
It's absolutely bonkers. Like, first of all, to keep getting better when you were already leading the country in goal, and that every single opponent knows who she is and what she can do, and she is still doing. I mean, we talked about this last year. I mean, she arguably has more scoring, like more help around her for scoring, than she has in years past, and she's still doing this. Because not that she's not talented, but I think at times last year I was like, it's because she's the only one who could score a goal. And so you thought like, okay, because if you looked, her line mates just had all the assists for her, and you could tell the puck was going to Abbey, which, like, to be fair, I also would shovel that way. But yeah, I just think that she's doing this in the WCHA as a 5th year. Like, there are no secrets or surprises here. I mean, I guess there are, because nobody is going to pull the lacrosse stick last week. But I just mean that, like, defenses and game plans, like, you couldn't scout her more if you tried, right? Like, every team she's playing knows what they're going up against, and she's going out and scoring 4 goals. Like, it's bonkers. I don't have like a better word for it. She's just the skill there is sort of unmatched. I think we haven't seen anybody sort of as good or doing that. Like maybe when Alex Carpenter was doing that at BC, is like the best I could come up with at the moment. But yeah, it's that nobody is surprised by this, and she's still kind of doing it at will. That just leaves me sort of speechless when you watch her. It's just, it all looks so effortless. And I think she's having a ton of fun, which helps. She's the type of player that like needs that freedom and enjoys being a menace, and also enjoys, like, I mean, I think everybody enjoys. I think she's at her best when she is happy and loving the game and they're winning, and it's this much fun.
That's gonna be fun to watch in the Olympics too.
Yeah, not mad about the timing in that way.
Right. I mean, we saw that this was
right?
not just a at Minnesota thing, because she was doing this at the rivalry series as well. So this is not necessarily limited to college. This is something that I think she could really give a boost to the U.S. team.
If I remember correctly, she paired with Janicki with the U.S., and they were playing really well together. I think it helps when you have two sort of very talented, creative people. I think they feed off each other really well.
Sure. Not to be outdone last week, Joy Dunne scored 4 times.
That's a bad dad
Ohio
pun.
State's...
Stop it.
Oh, sorry. I wasn't even thinking that, honestly, but then it came out and I'm like, oh, crap. 7-4 Ohio State over Minnesota State on Friday in Mankato, and Joy Dunne scores 4 times. And Ohio State got the sweep the next day with a 4-1 win. These are, okay, so we've talked about 2 players that are going to be gone for a few weeks, starting not this weekend coming up, but the next week. So I'm interested in your thoughts on, like,
what happens when your star...
these teams are, where Ohio State, Wisconsin, Minnesota are going to be left in a week. Knowing that, okay, so next week, not this coming week, but next week, Wisconsin plays at Minnesota. The following weekend, Ohio State plays at Wisconsin. So those are these games that we've expected and we know are going to be great, regardless of who's on the ice or not on the ice, but there's going to be something missing in a lot of those.
Well, I wanted to double check, so I just went and looked, and like for Ohio State, 4 of their top 6 scorers are going to be at the Olympics, right? Hilda Svensson, Joy Dunne, Sani Van Hanen, and Mira Uniker. So it's not just talking about Joy Dunne, right? Like it's that's a large portion of what Ohio State's been able to do this year. I think they're probably going to be the most tested in terms of needing the rest of their roster to stand up, to step up. But I also, like, I don't have a doubt that those players are capable. It's just whether or not they sort of do it in the way that the team needs, right? Like, it's not always easy when to take on that completely new role. I think the bonus for Wisconsin is that, like, essentially their lines are leaving en masse, and so it's not pieces going, but like I don't know if
that's one way of looking at it. Sure,
it feels like it would be easier to like not replace one person on your line, but to just like move the second line up, right? Also, they got
you're
to
playing
keep Lacey,
3 lines instead of 4, right?
who had a spectacular weekend. Lacey, even since not making the U.S. roster, has been I think extra motivated to show
It
some
seems
stuff.
like it.
But yeah, I think I don't know. None of us know. I'm just hypothesizing, but it does seem like it might be easier. Who knows? I don't have an answer, but it feels like Ohio State is going to struggle from the volume of players in their top scoring, and I think Minnesota is going to struggle because it's Abbey Murphy, and I think it's not just Abbey, the goal scorer, Abbey the playmaker, but I think her personality drives a ton of what they do. And also just her creativity. I think she's a player that elevates everybody around her. And when you're back to do a quarter, when things are not working or whatever, I think Abbey is the person that helps them get out of that. So, and for Wisconsin, who knows? What do you talk about so many players leaving? I think it's impossible to replace KK Harvey. So, the idea of even talking about somebody taking that role, it seems hilarious. What are your thoughts on what that looks like?
I mean, we can talk about KK Harvey, Layla Edwards, Kirsten Sims, Adela Shapovalov, all we want, but they're losing their starting goalie, Ava McNaughton, and
I am
Raya
shocked
Stewart,
they
who's
have not played her more.
Has only played a couple games as a freshman, and so
but some of these non-conference games, why are you not playing Raya Stewart? Like, every time her lineup came out when they were playing somebody, like, even at the holidays, I just was like, she doesn't need experience. I don't understand.
She played that Stonehill game that ended up 17-2 or whatever it was. She's played a third period of a game. I feel like she was in another one, but yeah. And so her first opportunity then is going to be, hey, go play at Ritter against,
good luck,
the Gophers.
Double checking stuff.
I don't know. I understand
particularly tall, right? Like, they're very different goalies,
right? I understand when you have Ava McNaughton on your roster, you play her kind of mentality. That knowing you're going to be without her for a month, play her in the ones that you do have her for. But it really does open up the second guessing of, if that month does not go well in goal, what has happened with that decision. So we know Wisconsin
also got, like, if you're doing that, but also have, like, now you're doing that and not always super solid second and third defensive line.
Right.
I don't know.
Yeah,
seriously, every time their roster
Yep.
came out in a game where you were like, okay, Wisconsin should handle this fine. Why is Ava McNaughton facing the 7 shots? I really think, Lord knows who's questioning Mark Johnson, and yet I'm just like, I don't understand these.
That's a very valid point of, like, okay, he's usually made the right decision, so what are we doing here?
I don't think I'm smarter than him, so clearly I'm in the wrong, but it feels not great.
Yeah, well, that's one of those we're going to have to see, because if it goes well, obviously she's there for a reason. I mean, she was a
she's
got a tremendous pedigree.
She does, but she's also been sitting for a year, and just I think that she will handle things fine, like from a stop a shot that comes at me sort of situation. But there's all the other things that you just, like you said, playing in Ritter and all that sort of stuff, that I just feel like allowed her to find some of that comfort and not have essentially like your first start, because playing Stonehill wasn't even in a college barn. So yeah, I don't know. it seems that it's head scratching. Let's put it that way.
Okay. One more result I wanted to get to before we take a break. Merrimack beating UConn 2-1 in overtime last Friday. Avery Anderson scoring the overtime goal after Emma Pfeffer equalized with just under 6 minutes to play there. UConn 37-17 in shots on goal, but can't get that to equal a victory. Doesn't really cost the Huskies in the NPI, still fifth there. So it's could be a speed bump for them. We will see, but it definitely was one of those kind of results.
Yeah, for sure.
When it came over on Friday.
Yeah, I think too, time will tell. I think on this, whether it was a bump in the road or a bigger speed bump that we need to worry about. But I think one of the big things that was sort of a topic of conversation at the U18 this week was the idea of like needing to go through adversity, whether that is going down a goal or losing, that can come in a bunch of different ways, but like you don't know how you're going to react to that sort of stuff until you're in it. And I think it's good to win or lose a couple games and be in some tough situations, be stymied, but like put 37 shots on goal and score once. Right? You said 2-1? Yes.
2-1, yep.
And like learn from that, because that's the only way. Like you don't want to be in that situation in an elimination game. So I think it sort of can't be overstated how important that is, particularly sort of when we're talking, obviously this is teenagers at U18, but like don't forget the college kids are still young too. I think sometimes, particularly with some of these squads, we talk about them like they're professionals, and they are not. And so I assume that this is one of those smack on the back of the head. What were you doing? Learn from that and move on sort of situations. I trust that that's the case for UConn, but I guess we will wait and see.
Yes. Just one more mention before we go. Holy Cross up to number 14 in the USCHO.com poll this week. Also 14th in the NPI after beating BU 4-2 on Saturday. Holy Cross 16-7-1 on the season. So this is another one of those, where we were not necessarily
paying attention. Yeah.
Right. But it does feel like a little bit of the, Hockey East seeming to put in a team that we weren't expecting every year to
the door is open
be
and
in one of the top spots. Yeah.
They're taking some of those points. And I like that they're not, Holy Cross isn't a team that puts a ton of goals in the net overall normally. And so like a 4-2 win is a good solid. They're not eking these out is basically what I'm saying. And I think it's good to see that they're not, winning 1-0 games, but they're really like putting together an offense, which is nice.
Yeah. Okay, another quick break, and then we will talk about the Beanpot third place and championship coming up Tuesday night, and the other games that are coming up on the schedule in NCAA women's hockey. Stay with us on the podcast. Welcome back to the podcast. Todd and Nicole to wrap things up this week. Beanpot Tuesday, a championship game coming up this week. Harvard will play Boston University for the championship, 7:30 Eastern on Tuesday, after Boston College and Northeastern have the third place game at 4:30 Eastern. Again, these games at TD Garden, which we hope, like we mentioned last week, will have a good crowd to cheer this one on. It was cool seeing that last season. Harvard and BU again. Just saw this happen in Belfast, and these are teams that gonna need to win their conference tournament to go anywhere in the postseason. Going to need to build up some results before then to really even have any thought of that, I would think. A Beanpot championship could mean a little bit in that effort, I would think. And just in having some good feelings as you're going into really the last month of the regular season.
Yeah, agreed. And I think it can't be understated, like, how big a jump this is for Harvard after having, they won 2 games last year. They were 2-25-2, and right now they're 10-10-1 and playing for the Beanpot championship. From a team morale position, from a recruiting position, like, there's just a lot that is positive about this from Harvard. And I think we've talked about, some of their wins and maybe we weren't expecting, like, no, we really weren't sure what to expect from this team. So, they won one conference game last year. So good for them to really have a bounce back here and sort of keep doing it. Like you said, they're still going to have to do a lot to be talking postseason. But I think it's a huge, huge change from last year. And that's hard to do in 1 year. So good for them.
Right. This Saturday and Sunday, Northeastern and UConn have a home and home. Well, I don't know if you can even call that anymore. Northeastern doesn't have a home, so can you call it a home and home series? Anyway, it's at UConn on Saturday, and Northeastern is hosting UConn Sunday at Bentley's Arena. So that's their home of
Connecticut
of the week. No, it's in the Boston. People are gonna tell me I'm wrong, but Waltham, I think. So somewhere in the greater Boston area, I believe.
Which still could be good. No, I'm kidding.
No, but it's more within range of Northeastern than UConn. So yeah. So but these are the two teams that are ranked the highest in Hockey East. A couple of teams that we know are have had their bumps in the last couple of weeks. So if either of these teams can come out with 2 wins, that's a massive result.
Yeah, I would say even a win in a tie or a win in a extra tie, like a majority of the points, I think has to be the goal here. It'll be really interesting. And we don't necessarily often get like that back-to-back. Hockey East spreads out their games a lot more. And so kind of fun that we've got this home and pseudo home. Like a lot is decided for this conference out of this, like likely out of this weekend. So that's a lot going on. I enjoy it.
Northeastern 6 points ahead of UConn in the Hockey East standings, both having played 14 conference games. So that's your gap, one weekend's game. And so if UConn can win both of them in regulation, that's a tie at the top of the standings, which would make that a real fun next couple of weeks here as they kind of position against each other without playing each other then.
Yeah, and then they play each other the last weekend of the regular season. They play Friday, February 20th. So a lot going on here in the final weeks. On
the flip side, Northeastern can almost kind of take a stranglehold on the conference if they win all 6 points there. So
Yes.
So obviously a lot going on in that Saturday Sunday series. A lot going on in Cornell's world this weekend. Number 12 Cornell playing at number 7 Princeton Friday and at number 6 Quinnipiac on Saturday. So there's your test of the week for an ECAC team, is going on the road to play those two teams. You have to love a challenge, but back to back with those two teams this season is a lot.
It is, yeah. And sort of some different styles, it's a tough back-to-back to prepare for in a couple of different ways. And Cornell is maybe not quite as bad as UMD, but as a team that just has to be head-scratching in terms of I don't know what to expect from them week to week or what I want to be looking for them to do. So I don't have any... I'm glad I'm not prognosticating what's going to happen there, because I'm just I don't know. I believe that Cornell has the wherewithal to go in and really do something with those 2 games this weekend, but it all would not surprise me the other way around. And so, that's going to be interesting.
Yeah. And in the WCHA, Minnesota looks for its first win of 2026 at Minnesota State Mankato. At Minnesota State in Mankato, I should say. Couple of teams that really could use a positive. There's been positive points. I mean, Duluth won a shootout against Wisconsin 2 weeks ago. Minnesota State has been right there with obviously had the sweep of Minnesota earlier this season, but of late it's been a rougher go. Good vibes would be appreciated on both of these sides.
Yeah. Duluth needs those points more for their season, but yeah, Minnesota State is a team that I think when they really are clicking and when they really believe that when they're really hyped and it all comes together, are a really tough team. But I'm not sure how often all of those pieces click at the same time. And so I think that's where it's going to be, if they can sort of really settle in and play the game they want to play, or depending on what Duluth team shows up, I guess.
Duluth is kind of on an island in the WCHA standings right now. In fourth place, they're 15 points behind third place Minnesota and 10 points ahead of fifth place Minnesota State. So and then you look further down, Minnesota State, St. Cloud State tied for fifth at 17 points. St. Thomas a point back at 16. So that's going to be an interesting race to follow, just as much as the race for first is. We've got Wisconsin 3 points ahead of Ohio State, who is 2 points ahead of Minnesota. A lot to be decided there, but I mean, Duluth feels like kind of locked into that 4 spot, and unless something goes massively right or massively wrong, right? I mean, there's a chance of that, swinging, after a few weeks, but it does kind of feel like they're heading towards another 4th place finish in WCHA.
Interesting.
Yep.
And so putting themselves closer to UMD and also giving them breathing room behind them, like it's a bigger weekend for Minnesota State than maybe it initially looked.
Yep, absolutely. Okay, Nicole, I know you need some sleep.
Yeah.
But
we should shout out the PWHL Takeover Tour in Washington, D.C. We've seen the D1 and DC program tournament do well, and they set a new U.S. record for attendance at that game. I know I have absolutely no idea how many tickets were sold for TD Garden for the Beanpot, but I know that people have been talking about wanting that to be able to set a record there. So I guess we'll see what those numbers look like on Tuesday. But yeah, it's been a good week for women's hockey, looking pretty good on a national scale. And Washington D.C. sure did make a pretty big statement for we should have a team. So shout out to everybody there. It felt like everybody I knew in my feed was at that game. I had some some FOMO of that, and between that and the big crowd here, it was a fun weekend for that. So I hope TD Garden's rocking as well. I hope everybody shows up for them in Boston.
All right, you can make sure to follow those scores, stats, standings at USCHO.com, and Nicole will have a wrap up after the weekend as always, and we will be back next week for another edition of the podcast. For Nicole, I'm Todd. We'll see you then.